This is the trip report for Peru 2026. I spent 4 weeks there from May 4th until landing back in Boston on June 2nd. I will be packing for another trip during this because probably something about the autistic mind and multitasking, busying the body to let the mind roam free. Something like that. Back to more rivers and mountains with Vermont. Gonna do this out of view because no one needs to see my underwear. But Peru was a trip indeed. First time in Latin America. Shot up to 10,000 feet after living at sea level for almost all my life. Bedridden for a day. In and out of consciousness for 2-ish days. Partially because of the red eye and the very gassy woman next to me. It is what it is. SOCKS. But after those first couple of days, it was quite alright. I slept fine. Although I developed sleep apnea, central sleep apnea. If I was positioned wrongly with any pressure on my ribs, I would gasp in the night. At least that was what my roommate told me. Although it wasn't bad enough to need earplugs apparently, even though he also did bring earplugs. He chose not to wear them. Maybe a sensory thing. Maybe he's autistic. Who knows? The purpose of the trip. The purpose of the trip were for 2 retreats I was invited to at a rate that I could just barely afford. I'm very glad I went and figured out how to make the dollars go long in those 4 weeks. But the first retreat was, I suppose, a business retreat or professional development. And the retreat name was called God-Sized Dreams, capital G. It was not a Christian retreat, but most of the members, at least 60% of them, happened to be Christian. At least the retreat leader was also Christian, and we prayed over every meal. You weren't forced to or coerced to. You could simply sit there in silence. But it was encouraged that you put a joyful, grateful intention over the nourishment that you were being provided for, especially by well-skilled Peruvian nanny chefs. I say nanny because it's the vibes I got, but who knows? Very fruitful experience, as it was a trip that was a mix of professional logistic development for various odds and ends of a business, time management, self-management, knowing where to put your time in order to actually gain clients. But that was only half of it. The other half was this sense of inner work or parts work or internal family system based therapy and activities. I'd say I got the most out of that particular thing. But yeah. So to get into the meat and potatoes of the whole ordeal, the internal family systems parts work component was essentially me getting this understanding of the behaviors that transferred from my paternal lineages. So my mother's father and my father's father, and those relative traumas from mother's father escaping Lithuania and Nazi occupation as a very young child, and mother's father escaping China and the Cultural Revolution and starvation as a slightly older child. Still young, but probably a teenager of some range in that age. So So all that to say, those resulted in very unhealthy understandings and expressions of anger. And this expression of anger usually resulted in turning it inward, or to not express it at all. And the unhealthy expression of this essentially resulted in a lack of clear boundary, self to self, in that integrity sense, and self to others, in the sense of like, this is what I tolerate, and this is what I can't tolerate. And more specifically, it bled over into the business and the personal life, of course, in the personal life. But in the business, it was tolerating short-term gigs that ultimately bled energy from the work I felt called to do. And broadly is to help people manage and regulate their nervous system, their body, their mind, and that mind-body connection. But I kept falling into the trap of, I need to take this gig for this guy's pain that he's not really that committed to. He doesn't really see why it's important to spend time and energy on solving it, but he knows he wants it to go away, and he doesn't want to do pills and this and that and the other thing. And just a lot of those conversations like, I don't want to work with this person, but I need the money. And so this is this kind of conversation. You can get into a whole conversation like, do I actually need the money, or do I need to just be in debt for a little bit to actually know what is a soul goal and not a troll goal, and what is a mindset of abundance and not scarcity. And so the expression of anger, the unhealthy expression of anger, is from a mindset of scarcity. This scarcity carried over from Nazi occupation of Lithuania, carried over from Cultural Revolution, starvation China. This scarcity mindset that you always need a little bit in the bank, you always need a little security in your sense of self in order to survive. So survival is the name of the game, not thriving. And this is kind of what I unpacked on that first week in Sacred Valley, Peru. Although I think the town most close by is named Pisac, P-I-S-A-C, which is I like to call hippie haven. Lots of substances that are available to you. Plant medicines, they would call it. And some more therapeutic than others, depending on your context and the thing you're working through and your preferences. Not to downplay that aspect, because it is pretty significant in the culture, similar to how coffee is significant in the Western culture. The coca leaf is significant in the Andean culture, although it's treated as more sacred. Even you can even hold 3 leaves in a fanning out shape as a kind of dedication or thankfulness expression to the spirit of the mountains, or the apus that it is in the native language, not Spanish, Quechua. Quechua is the native language. But to go back to the retreat and the result of that, I did realize, especially talking with some of the leadership and getting clarity on the fact that I didn't really enjoy my life as it was in any obvious degree. That was good clarity. Did not even need any drugs by that point, unless you count the low-level stimulant of coca tea. But that was a lot. That was a lot to process. This generational scarcity behavior mindset trauma. More than it being a lot to process, I also kept the weight of post-trip integration in mind. Like, don't just be in this high of revelation or realization, but what does this actually mean? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my relationships? And I didn't really get to a meaningful answer in that until a few events. And one of those events was the second retreat, about 2/3 through my trip, another week-long event called Integrated Masculine. And so this was what I felt I needed, maybe in some divine plan, in order to integrate this sense of not knowing what to do about this anger thing, not knowing what to do about this integration of generational trauma and the thriving that comes after that realization. And I knew one thing for certain, that conventional therapy was not going to be the way. Part of that is this suspicion that I have been living with autism for 28 years after taking one of the online assessments a couple months ago and landing squarely on the line of the spectrum, in the middle of the spectrum. I'm now in the process of getting screened officially with referral through my primary care. But all that to say is that for someone with autism, conventional talk therapy is very dysregulating. At least for me, it's because I'm not actually, doesn't feel like I'm actually doing anything. I'm just rehashing the same thing. And even in better versions of that, where I get to some deeper meaning, kind of like what I did with the first retreat, it's only a realization. It doesn't really cover like integration. Maybe it helps you have better conversations with your loved ones and you figure stuff out that way. But the way it happened in the first retreat was that one of the exercises was having you find the relationship that produced the most tension or rage or anger, and really they just dug into that. Like ask questions without leading, and in some part of that, especially with the men, it came to this expression of anger, where essentially you stanced up, so to speak. Putting a fan on me, it's really hot in here. You stanced up, you got in a stance that you're ready to push like a car or something, the heaviest thing you can imagine that you can still push. And that the retreat leader would push against you. And this is a humble brag, but I needed like 2 or 3 people to push against me, despite the altitude and the exhaustion, still pretty strong and biomechanically sound there. But that physical expression really started to unlock a lot of these things. And it started to unlock the fear that was underneath the anger, underneath the frustration. The fear was that I would not be a good father, that I would not be capable or aware, or I would repeat all the mistakes of my paternal lineage, of acting from that scarcity. I would repeat all these mistakes and be doomed to that. But thankfully, in part due to my faith, I believe the redeeming power of Christ is going to make that not true. That I can behave in a way that sees those mistakes and learns from them, and is better for having realized that. And so that can come out in my behavior after leaving Peru, after coming back from Boston. I believe this, and even me expressing this, communicating this reflection, I'm literally seeing myself on the camera, literally self-reflecting on this realization, is part of the integration. Reminding myself of these lessons and looking at what is the most ready action I can take today to push this actualization forward. So part of that is simply packing, not at the last minute, with at least an hour, all things considered, which is enough for a weekend, I'd say. Preparedness, self-honesty, integrity with your word and your promises. These things that may not be seen as particularly masculine, but just be a human quality of good character. But the second retreat, And there was a week in between, kind of chilling and being in town and recuperating from the emotional stressors. I gotta say, the town of Cusco is overrated. I would be there for a day and I'm good. All these people trying to get you on tours and all these merchants, it's just a headache. Hostels are hit and miss, whatever. Food is great. Food is great all over Peru. But after that sort of chilling out for a week, the men's retreat started. Integrated masculine. And the way I view it is that the retreat leader ran something that he believed he needed. And so that created a far greater likelihood, that everyone else would need it too, to some degree. Not just this vague sense of maturation, of going from boy to man, even though we had a span of ages from like 23 to early 40s. This retreat hit hard. This was I mean, literally for the first full day, we punched each other in the head with sacred combat, where luckily we had a Muay Thai instructor present, not planned, but he had been one of the he was one of the participants, and so he taught everyone some basic combinations. I had some prior experience, but I still did not train my defense enough to not get punched in the head. I think we all got punched in the head. Although we did three rounds, and the second 2 rounds were much lighter after we figured out how to not hold back, but be more technical, be more calm under duress, which is the one of the aspects of masculinity that seemed to be communicated, and that I assign myself to, that I co-signed to, that I agree with. But that was the first full day. The second full day was more just talking, but a few major topics. One of them was understanding a woman's cycle, monthly cycle, and each stage of that cycle, and how to best support them in that cycle, and not, simply expecting them to take care of it and be aware of it themselves, because they're in it. And so you're not in it as a man and woman relationship. And so when you're not in it, you have a much easier time navigating it than when you're in it. And this might seem like obvious, might seem common sense, but I think 99% of men out there don't really know anything about the cycle, so probably worth looking into for most men in a relationship or wanting to be in a relationship. So yeah, there's that. I'm not sure. I think we had another day of talking, or some relaxation day before the fourth day, or the third day, one of those, where we did a 10-hour hike from 9,500 feet to 14,500 feet, just about, or just shy of 5,000 feet of elevation gain. And so this elevation gain was not easy. It was not easy. It was quite difficult. It was the hardest hike of my life. I would say as close to near death as I have ever gotten, because I could not even muster the strength to take a piss at the top. So that was cool. That was a cool time, and fun to push myself and be okay. The toenails of my big toes are still purple. I swear I tied my boots right, but that's just how it goes sometimes. What preceded that about a week, and what followed that day about a day, were these plant medicine journeys facilitated by a substance called Wachuma, or San Pedro cactus. And to give you some context, Wachuma is a psychedelic cactus that the translation of Wachuma means to cut off the head. And it is a indication of how it is harvested for extraction and the effects on the mind and spirit. When you separate the thinking mind from your lived experience, at least for an hour, the peak of that substance 5-6 hour journey, especially if you're in a beautiful place called Pisac or Three Lakes in Sacred Valley, also at 14,000 feet up, you understand what they mean by the medicine being a heart opener. Because you are experiencing this connection, this emotional connection to parts of yourself that have largely been ignored. So going back to the first retreat, I had 2 experiences with this medicine. One that followed the first retreat a few days later with a mixed gendered group, which I meditated on the men in my life, myself, my brother, my father, my grandfathers, and the behaviors that have been adopted through scarcity, through lack, through struggle, that may have served them at some point, but at this point in time, for me and my brother who's still alive, for my father who's still alive, does not serve them any longer. And so one of the things I did after that first experience of plant medicine, Awashuma, was that I called my brother and I had him tell me this sentence: my worth is more than as a provider. I didn't expect him to believe it. I didn't expect it to be said with conviction. I just wanted to hear it from him, to plant the seed in some way. I think that's probably something a lot of men struggle with, especially as they gain financial success, they gain the ability to support a family and support themselves, I guess. But that was just the tip of the iceberg, because the second experience, following that arduous 10-hour near-death hike, the day after, the same 14,000 foot mountain range of the first plant experience. The second one was with all men instead of mixed gender, and it was meditating on the women in my life. In fact, I think most of the men, if not all of them, meditated on the women in their lives who they felt they were not serving well or with integrity. And so you can call this meditating on the divine feminine, if you subscribe to that language. Or you can call it reflecting on the relationships with women in your life and evaluating if you can say with conviction you are showing up in integrity and service. And so this other aspect of masculinity that was highlighted on the trip, was that you would show up with this spirit of self-sacrifice and of service. That is in some part the essence of a masculine, integrated man. And so this was not the end of this retreat experience. We were about 2/3 of the way in. I would say the next day was what I would call the spiritual end. When I say that, I mean that the day's events were set up so that it was a day of silence. So 10 hours. No miming, no communication, unless you wanted to play chess, then you simply pointed at a chessboard. And that was so that you could reflect, you could plan, you could do what you needed to do that did not require words, that would not be distracted by words and conversation. And I believe everyone, if not most of the men there, did so. Wow, this is tiring to talk about. This is really tiring. Got a lot of work done internally. I probably need a hoodie for Vermont. I'll take this one. Still has that essential oil from that trip. Blue Lotus is a very nice smell. If you can get it from Egypt, it's like the real deal. I would highly recommend. So after the day of silence, at the end of the day of silence, we engaged in a bonfire, and we did one more substance. This was a tobacco snuff, which you can bring across the water. So that says rapé. And under that Sunu, which is the tribe in the Amazon which it is from. So this is an inhaled tobacco, and you inhale it through your nose and you let it sit there for a few minutes, and it is very painful. But the effect after, the desired effect, is that you feel grounded. And what I mean by that is that you feel so present and aware of your body with this little bit of tingling that you cannot think of anything else. You cannot think of your anxieties from the day prior, day of, day later. You're simply there, present in your body, and you feel connected to truth. In fact, one of the effects is that it makes you cry. Probably because of the irritation in your nose, but this might be the power of suggestion from the leader expressing this. But when you cry, the tears come first, and the thing you are actually crying about comes after. The thought comes after, the truest sense of the thing. And so it's not meant to simply produce tears and to produce an emotional event. It is meant to help to process what is left unfelt, and so what is left unembodied, in order for you to take action and to move from someplace that is true and real. And your perspective may differ, but mine is that if you feel the feelings, right and true actions tend to come after, if you are willing to feel the feelings. I'm not going to go much deeper into that. I'd say that's probably enough. The day after that was wrapping up the experience. Just a quick half hour, an hour in the morning to do the shortest debrief and close it out. And excuse me. Some more context of the local town of Pisac. I described it as a hippie haven, but I believe, to be less facetious, I'll try to explain why that is. This place is a very sacred place. The area is called Sacred Valley, surrounded by mountains. That valley is Sacred Valley. And a lot of the people in there are seeking the truth in some way. Let's say that way is spiritual. Some of those become embodied in action, in building a business, building themselves, building a practice, something. But I'd say what is more true is that there's this air of seeking. Yes, seeking truth. Yes, seeking righteousness. Yes, seeking something. And I'd say I joined that seeking in some way. And that seemed to have changed over the course of my stay. But the seeking that I came to after my second bout of ecstatic dance was that I no longer wanted to be restricted or restrained by the limiting beliefs of how I can enjoy myself, and being explicit about, like, if no harm is being done to others, then you should just enjoy yourself. You should just learn to enjoy your life in a nourishing way. And so that does not mean spend all your money today, go into great debt, live for the day, YOLO. That means taking in some part of that and balancing this building of a future with enjoying your day-to-day. For me, it was even simple acts of starting jiu-jitsu again, that I wanted to do it in a way that I enjoyed it deeply. And one of those ways is simply not being injured, so I can continue doing it. And so that's how my practice started. The truth that I'm coming to now, especially after a solo fire, my first successful fire built on the last night I was in Peru, this truth of what I feel called to do is this work of facilitating and creating an experience of belonging and safety in the body, and not just for myself, not just for someone physically in front of me, but for someone across the ocean, for someone that they are willing to follow a set of instructions for 5 minutes fully and sincerely. And when I've seen that happen, I've seen someone's whole body and face expression change dramatically. They didn't even consider themselves anxious before, but now they're grounded like nothing else. I walk people through an exercise called tree breathing that I've been inspired from Tai Chi and Qigong from, but a lot of the specifics in the mechanical anatomical cueing creates a much easier access into this grounded, anchored, rooted state. As if you're breathing, and every breath you feel these imaginary roots anchored deeper into the ground, down to the earth's core. And you can find your center of gravity, your sacral chakra, your sea of qi, your lower dantian. This is all one singular point, about 3 fingers down from the belly button and about the same distance in. And that point creates this grounded sensation in the body that translates readily and usually immediately into the mind. This sense of calmness that washes over you, similar to what I experienced with the rape, with the tobacco snuff. You're essentially quieting all the noise in order to tap into the sensation of feeling your body and the sensations and temperature and weight and being aware of where your limbs are in space, and having that be so available, and having the technique be used. You can use it to find muscle imbalances and work on those, and that's fine and good for chronic pain. I've used it for asthma, sleep apnea, what was the other one? Scoliosis. That's fine. That's just fine. But the thing I want to emphasize is what comes after. What comes after resolving pain. And this is the question I was wrestling with essentially all 4 weeks in Peru. What comes after? And so what comes after is this work inspired by a client I have that is helping me flesh out this idea, who is autistic and has an autistic daughter. And they are 33 years old, a very numerically symbolic and meaningful number. And their daughter is about that age, like coming into or around like the tween years, like 10, 11. And about the age where I faced a significant period of unrest and trauma in some sense, where my autism was largely ignored before that, but it was accentuated by the stress of having been moved from the United States to Taiwan with no plan in place or even being formed of how to have a good life. That's a whole other story. But basically, I was thrown to the nearest elementary school closest to my grandmother's home, and it's a whole story. But anyways, the point is, this dharma, this calling, this purpose-driven mission that hopefully has a business behind it, I'm still working on that, is to help parents understand how to ground themselves, how to be present in their body, how to fix problems. I mean, for this one particular person I'm thinking of, they fixed their sleep apnea problems, their mouth breathing problems. They fixed their split abs from childbirth that has been there for years. It's been there for nearly a decade, and we fixed it in 6 weeks, so they tell me. And again, that's all fine and good. The physical pain, fixing that is all fine and good. But it is only a means. It is only a means to enjoying your life. And this is the ethos I'm carrying out here, because part of that near-death hike experience was that I didn't prepare for it. I should have. That's a mistake to learn from and becoming a better, more integrated man. But I want to emphasize, I didn't do anything for that. I didn't do cardio. I just did the tree breathing, the pressure breathing, the biomechanics training, which is very isometric, and a couple hours of walking each day. Relatively flat terrain. Boston is relatively flat, save for a few hills here and there. And I say that partially to brag, but I also say that to give perspective on what is the point of physical training. For me, for my autistic mind, it needs to cover as many bases as possible. The training needs to do as much as possible with as little time as possible, ideally with as little thinking as possible. Well, that last one is a little hard for the racing autistic mind. And what I mean by this is that one training methodology that done 2, maybe 3 hours a week needs to be able to reverse chronic pain, needs to be able to improve breathing mechanics, needs to be able to make you run faster and jump higher. This is what the process needs to do, because otherwise you're not fixing problems, you're managing them. And the problems I want to fix are the breathing problems. The asthma I've helped people fix. The sleep apnea I've helped people fix, and myself and others. I used to have asthma as a kid as well. The scoliosis I've helped people fix, and the posture issues I fixed in myself and others. These are all individual problems, and they can be managed very well. They can be kept the same very well. Well, nothing ever stays the same in this world. You can delude yourself into thinking that, but that is all that is. It's a delusion. You either improve or degenerate. Either regenerate or degenerate. Those are the two options. You can create a philosophical argument otherwise and spend your time with that. But I recommend you live it out. Anyways, the point of fixing the pain is to enjoy your life. And so if you want to do ecstatic dance without worrying about your body breaking down, that's the point. Not making the body in this safe and protected environment and conditions and artificially create safety and strength under the Smith machine and whatever. It's like all these facades that aren't actually meaningfully contributing to your life. And so why am I deciding now to help autistic parents with autistic kids? The simple answer is that it is an underserved community that is usually given a list of solutions from a neurotypical perspective. At worst, they're solving problems piecewise, similar to the chronic pain thing. You can solve each source or site of chronic pain and not fix the whole system. In a similar vein, you can fix each sign and symptom of autism and have that be an improvement from what was there before. But it does leave you wanting. It left me wanting just looking through the options. But at best, you're given a modality that simply chooses the best of these options. Maybe top 3, top 5, top 10, whatever. And you're still given this list. It's just ordered a little differently. It's just prioritized a little differently. And there's probably some marginal return on minutes put in with that structuring. But fundamentally, it's not solving the problem. And the problem to be solved is not autism. It's not even the signs and symptoms of autism individually. The problem is that you can be so disconnected from your body. You can be so in your mind that you simply cannot even fathom or have the capacity to understand the connection between your body and mind. I mean, some people out there still don't think that what you eat affects how you feel, which that's insane, but everyone's on their own journey. What I mean by this mind-body connection for autists is that the awareness is excruciating, coming from my own experience. The solutions are lacking. And so when you can have a very minimized container of awareness with a very pinpointed mode of intervention, like if you were to train how you breathe muscularly, mechanistically. A little joke here. Your lungs are up here. They are not down here. Lungs up here, not down here. Belly breathing, no. Unless you want to meditate like that for some particular reason, that's fine. Training the breath in the belly, no. Training the breath in the lungs and ribs, yes. So this is kind of like these misconceptions that get carried out far and beyond their scope. Because you can meditate with the belly breath, and that can be a very meaningful and good pursuit for you. But when you're dealing with pain, when you're dealing with scoliosis, when you're dealing with asthma that dramatically improves with correcting your posture unconsciously, having that be an unconscious change, because you're training your breathing correctly, because you're training your body correctly, I would be pissed. I'd be fucking pissed. Because you might think that people are being purposely ignorant or even evil. And it's taken a lot of maturation to know that's not the case. People don't know what they don't know. And I might be talking about biomechanics on here, and it might sound like this. 我的名字是艾勒克斯，我喜欢吃西瓜，我喜欢吃水果. So that was just Chinese. And that's what it sounds like talking about biomechanics on the internet. That's what it sounds like talking about how to breathe, how to train your body to create unconscious change. That's what it feels like, at least. You can tell me otherwise when I clip this up and put it on the internet. But that was a long tangent. But not really. That was the result of the retreat. The retreat was not to just have a good time, which I did. It was a good time. The result of the retreat was to understand what it means to live in integrity. And for me, what it means is to pursue this mission of helping an autistic parent and child, at least the child,
feel like they belong in their body, feel like they're safe in their body. And I know deeply, intuitively, that safety and the belonging in their body is going to create such an opening for connection and community for them that life-changing doesn't even begin to describe the effect. Because I know, in a sense, what I've been doing for the past 28 years is masking my autism extremely well with the nutrition, with the biomechanics, with the this and that and the other thing, with the regulating in every single friggin' way it exists under the sun. I want that to be an option. I want that to be an option for these kids and parents that don't feel like they have any more options. That feel like the options they're given are only managing and settling and half giving up. I know most parents don't want to give up on their kids, if not all of them. At least all of them have some part of them that doesn't want to give up on their kids. And so I say this is for autistic parents and kids, but if you're smart, you understand that feeling grounded, safe, and belonging in your body can apply to anyone. And that's the point. It's not supposed to be specific to autistic parents and kids. It's supposed to be so fundamental, so ingrained in human nature across the board, that it can't not be true. It can't not be true that understanding how to train these systems of pressure in your body to create unconscious change in your breathing mechanics and how you stand and how you move, it can't not be true that this is the shortest way to resolving chronic pain. It can't not be true that integrating a grounded and regulated nervous system has to show in their posture. That can't not be true. It can't not be true that postural changes can be shown objectively, that you can see a difference, an obvious difference in someone's posture that's improved or not improved. That can't not be true. It can't not be true that many people out there will understand the significance of the mind-body connection and the significance of objective measures of the improvement of that mind-body connection, either in breath or in running, jumping, and playing pain-free if you were in pain before, or just being able to run, jump, and play with more freedom and athletic capacity than you had before. It can't not be true that that's obvious. It becomes not obvious when you have limiting beliefs. It becomes not obvious when you come from a lineage of scarcity, of this mindset passed down and taught to you at a young age, that lives in your subconscious, that takes over how you live your life and make your decisions. And I say this as someone who is still trying to exit that mindset, who's still trying to let go. And I'm not afraid to say I am brought to tears, I guess on average weekly. It's a weekly occasion, not every same day every week, but that frequency. And I'm brought to tears at the people and relationships in my life that are showing me that I'm still needed. And I'm still needed to make this mission, this business that I'm not sure will actually succeed. I don't even know what success means. It's just a feeling that this will fail. I don't even know what failure means. It's just a feeling. And so these are the things that kind of run in the background, especially if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you're autistic and an entrepreneur, especially if you're autistic, ADHD, and an entrepreneur. Although for me it's more autistic than ADHD, but I digress. This is a long trip report, but it was a long trip. It was a dense trip. There's a lot of things happening on this trip. The drugs were the least of it. But it's got this cool, I'm not sure if it's a puma or a jaguar. You can vote in the comments what you think it is. Receptacle for the tobacco snuff. But to try to wrap this up, there's a few questions I came away with and a few things I thought about that kind of cut through all the noise. One of them came to me towards the peak of the hike. I was so tired. I didn't have the energy for anxieties. At least not in the usual sense. The things that came up towards the peak of the hike was the deepest, clearest vision of fear that I could muster. And for me, I knew there was something to that, even if I couldn't have the energy to form a coherent sentence of a thought. The fear that shot through my mind and became a clearer and clearer picture is this fear that what would happen if I fully gave in to a fearful boyhood, if I became this person ruled by scarcity and fear. And what came through my mind was thinking about every loved one in my life and the closest association of death to them. For my partner, it was the degenerative dementia they shared with me about their family. For my brother, it was the liver failure and overall unexpressed anger that ate away at our grandfather from the inside. For my mother, it was the stroke that her mother died from, at least the complications, and the complications she's currently struggling through right now. For my father, it was the Crohn's disease his father died of, his guts falling apart, dying on that hospital bed. And for me, it was the image of, first it was one of my close friends who killed himself 9 years ago, hanging from a noose. And then every step that I took towards that peak, the image started to blur. But eventually it started to become clear again. And the image that replaced his face and figure was my face. And it became clearer and clearer with each step until I reached that final point, that final step, where it was crystal clear. I could see myself hanging from the ceiling. Then once I got to the peak, it was blank. Now I'll be picking apart that symbology for a long time. But the feeling that was there was very real. The feeling of, if I gave in fully to my fear and scarcity, that future is inevitable. Maybe not those exact events, but the absolute concentration of fear distilled into those images, that would be my future. I was going to say something else, but I totally forgot. I think it's about time I wrap this up. Do not fear.